Aloha, Noelani Lee. This is such a treasure and treat to get to connect with you a little bit about the experience of land acknowledgements that you do as the CEO and executive director of Ka Honua Mamona. And would love to hear a little bit more from you about the protocol, what it means to you, and why you've made this a part of the practice of coming to visit the fishery.
Mahalo, Nancy. Thank you for having me. I think one of the most beautiful things about most Indigenous cultures is the way we enter a place. And that for me, this is about that protocol and that process and that ritual. And I think that it's such an important piece of how we become relations of each other. So if we imagine that we're all connected and that we're all relations, it's how we acknowledge that we come together. And if you think of a family reunion, you might not know everyone that's there. If you have a big family and you have to explain your aunties and your uncles and how you come to be the person that you are, your parents and your siblings and your next generation. And in that same way, that's how many Indigenous peoples enter a space that they're not familiar with. And so in Hawaii, I didn't come up with this beautiful protocol. My ancestors did, but it's how we greeted each other and how we entered a space. And so when you came to visit us, we asked you to do an oli kahea or a way of introducing yourself. And my sons may or may not have blown the poo for you, or I might have sent someone out to do an oli kahea for you and ask permission to enter. And then I would have done an oli komo, a chant to welcome you into our space. And if you want, I can do one now.
I would love that. That would be
Okay.
beautiful. Yes.
So I'll have to stand and ask you to stand too. We always stand. And
Yes.
part of this is acknowledging we're entering a new space. We're stepping out of the mundane and into the spiritual realm. And I, in my practice, take 3 deep breaths before the oli or the chant. The first is to be grounded and feel the place, the land beneath your feet. The second is to let anything that's bothering you or not about what we're about to do together, to let it go. You let it drift off your shoulders and dissipate. And the third is to set positive intentions for the space we're about to be in together. So if you want to join me on the breathing, that's always a great grounding. Mai ka ulu kai ka holu na peo ka lau ka ni. No humali e kaina. Ia ka hunua momona pili me ke oni ali. Po e ke aloha. E kumu mai loku ka hale no ke aloha pumehana. E kumu mai ne maloko. E kumu mai me ke alohai. 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 After our oli and our welcome, we often breathe and exchange ha together. It's a light pressing of the forehead and the nose and a breathing together. Sharing our breath acknowledges our past, our kupuna, our wise ancestors, our today's generation, and our future generations. So
Envisioning my forehead pressed against yours and nose.
It's the safest way in a pandemic.
Exactly. Little did we know, right? We would need to innovate in this way. My memory was then we would gather in a circle, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that ritual and the placement of hands and a gesture of reciprocity and why that's such an important part of this protocol.
Yes, thank you for noticing and remembering. We like to do a what we call pico, a circling up together to a centering. And I was taught by my kupuna to give with the hand closest to our heart. So we slide that hand down and to receive with the other hand. And so everyone is both giving in the circle and receiving in the circle. I like to begin with that because I think that describes in advance the thinking that we want in our space, the
Mm,
reciprocal thought that we want, and then the reciprocal energy we want in our space. And I think if I had to identify some of our most tense areas in our barriers to relations, it's the thought of people and the idea of capitalism in my mind is taking more than you can get, more than you give. And so if we recognize that up front, people who that's their way of thinking or their thought process as they enter a space, it forces them to rethink that particular space. And hopefully will, in its reminding of us of how we want to be in pono, in balance, to be giving and receiving, to bring us into our pono, to bring us into our balance. And sometimes people don't do it on purpose. They bring that training and thought with them. What can I get out of today? What can I get out of this space? And we really want them to be thinking, what can I give to this space? What is the best part of myself that I can bring into this space? And I think that when we do that, we create long lasting relationships, like when you and Todd visited us,
yes.
that we feel are reciprocal in our relationships. Sometimes I ask you for help. Sometimes you ask me for help. And it's our help is given without the thought of return, just the trust of return. And I think that's the beautiful part of aloha.
So beautifully said. I want to ask one more question as we close, which is my memory again of this beautiful acknowledgement and welcome is that you asked us to know who we are as we come into the circle. And I think so much of us, particularly in the US, and those of us who have been disconnected from our Indigenous lands and our Indigenous heritage and our stories and connection to ancestors, this is a very powerful asking. And I think so much of what needs to sort of predate the ability to give is to know who you are that you are giving. Like we lack connection. And so I'm just wondering if you would be willing to share some of the questions that you asked us to root and ground us as we gathered in the Pico.
I'd love to. I think that in so many indigenous introductions, regardless of the way we do protocol, they may change slightly, but basically the question is, who are you? Why are you coming here? you know, who are you? Who 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 are you in way of who is your family or who is your community that you come from and what intentions do you bring into this space? And if we think psychologically of the best ways to interact, that's such a great way to introduce yourself. This is who I am. These are who my parents were. These are who my children are and will become. And this is what I'm bringing into this space. And that way we're reminding ourselves too, this is what I'm bringing here and I'm giving it freely with my aloha. And I think that that's so important because then we can place ourselves in the picture. And we, part of our Oli Kobo says, here's where we are. We recognize this beautiful breeze that blows off the ocean, that ruffles the fronds on the tips of our coconut palms. And we envelope you in love here in our hale, known for its warmest aloha.
Mm,
Come inside. And we tell you that formally. And then we say it a little more informally, come on in. But then we say the last line, but if you come, bring your aloha. And
mhm,
so it allows you this space of self-determination. Okay, if I go into this space, I have to remember to bring my best self. Can I do that? And
mhm.
if your answer is yes, come inside. And if your answer is no, you've self selected to stay outside.
And maybe find that best self another day, but if not, you know that
Yes,
those are the ways that we want to invite people into our space, and you've been clear
right.
about that intention and given us agency.
Yes,
You
and
are
time and condition. You
yes.
might not be your best self today to come,
Mm,
but maybe again tomorrow you try again and see if you can come in then. And I think that those are the most beautiful spaces that we allow each other to make those choices
mhm,
so that we can self-select. Okay, I'm ready to enter this space. Oh,
mm,
I'm not ready yet. I haven't cleansed this part of myself, or this part doesn't feel right to me. And then you have the choice not to. And I think that that's what makes us healthy is being able to make those decisions and choices for ourselves.
mm. And a healthy Ohana, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This has been so sweet. No, I appreciate you taking
Mahalo for
the
having
time.
me.
Yes, it's been beautiful.
Aloha.
Aloha.